Welcome to the Happy in the Mess podcast. We are your hosts, Marlena, Sherry, and Matthew. We are therapists and coaches, and we want to share our own stories with you, as well as the wisdom, insights, and tips we've learned along the way. Thanks for tuning in to this episode.
Welcome to this episode of the Happy in the Mess podcast. Today we're going to talk about friendships. So having just finished a couple episodes about vulnerability, I thought it was kind of timely that we take a look at who our supporters are or are not. So if you've struggled with making friends or keeping friends in this weird pandemic culture, this is going to be an episode that you want to hang in for. So I am the Misfit Coach, Matthew, and I'm here with two amazing experts and two women whom I consider to be my friends. I'm extremely blessed to call them that. So we have Marlena, the spiritual singles coach, and Sherry, the couples relationship coach. As a brief reminder, please like, share, comment, rate, review, send money, whatever you want to do on whatever platform you listen to. It makes a huge difference to those who are searching for answers to these questions. You can definitely help us out with that one. And you can actually find each of us on our own platforms as well. So there's definitely a rabbit hole to go down here. So for instance, Marlena, where can our listeners find you and what have you been working on lately?
Well, I'm actually rebranding as a singles coach because I really want to help single spiritual women create more wealth, health, love, and time in their lives. And I have some pretty cool practices, techniques to help women embody those things and receive more of that in their lives. So you can go to coachmarlena.com and book a call to have a consult with me if you're interested.
That's awesome. So very cool. How about you, Sherry? Where are you and what are you doing these days?
I'm at sherrytimker.com and I am between launches, but my program is for couples who've been together for a while and have fallen into roommate syndrome, where you just kind of live together and don't feel that deep connection or that spark anymore. And I have a dating program where they go on dates and I give them some structure to it so that they can reconnect and clear out some of the muck that gets in the way. So I'm at sherrytimker.com.
That's awesome. Thank you for both for sharing that. So I am at matthewemorgan.com, or you can find me on socials at Misfit Refuge. And I really work on just for those of us that don't feel like we belong, how do we find out what our strengths really are, try to figure out what our purpose is, and move forward from that. So, and these are all, I love working with the two of you. I think we have this great synergy of just being able to work together and find these places. And I think I look back on our friendship and it started as really just kind of three refugees that were all struggling with something similar. And we came together and then just started talking. We started supporting. And then next thing we know, we're on season 2 of our podcast. And I can't believe it's gone so quickly, but I'm appreciative to both of you. So
Same, Matthew, same.
Yes.
thank you. As we look at this, what kind of qualities do we look for in friends, whether it's new friends or trying to maintain friends? What do you two think? What have you found that really creates a good friendship?
Matthew, I have to ask you this. This is kind of turning around in the back of my head. Should I answer these questions in my kind of professional hat or in my personal hat? Because I feel like there's a real disconnect in what I might say to myself or a close friend versus what I might say to a client. So you'll have to give me some guidance here.
I appreciate that. I think it's a great distinction, because I think personally, and what I'm hearing is personally, professionally, there are areas that we really switch, and I think maybe some expectations of there. So I think for me, what I might look at, maybe from a professional advice, what would we tell other people to look for in their friendships? Because I think sometimes it's easy to recognize from the outside, and then we can dive into the deep recesses of Sherry's mind. So, yeah.
That's scary. Well, things that I look for in friends, obviously interesting people, but probably more than that is a sense of loyalty and reciprocity, and someone who has time to invest in a relationship. I think a lot of us are very, very busy. I moved to a new town a few years ago, And it just felt like a lot of people's dance card was already filled. And
Mm.
so looking for people who actually are interested in having new friendships.
Mhm.
Mm. For me, I mean, friendship is about maybe some shared interests or values. Because if we, a lot of friendships are made for me based on that. And I would tell my clients too, if you're looking for friends, go to places where you would want to hang out, and perhaps you will find people of like mind or similar interests. And while we can't just base entire friendships like we both like enjoy tennis, I have certainly had friendships based solely on shared interests. Those that last the test of time, though, are those that actually share similar values. Oftentimes, for me, it's spiritual values or spirituality, or a sense of spirituality helps me stay connected to people because there's also an ingrained intimacy when we discuss topics like that. And for me, intimacy in friendships is really important. Also, what's also important for me is what I don't want a friendship to be about or to have elements of, which is criticism and judgment, non-acceptance. I have found that those elements in a friendship can destroy them for me.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And constant negativity. Let me add that as well.
so I agree with all of that, but I do need to add that as a coach and therapist, I think it's really easy to fall into that uneven dynamic where we become a helper in a friendship rather than being a friend. And so I'm always very sensitive to how people kind of balance that.
I agree, Sherry. And as therapists and coaches, it's very easy for us to keep that hat on when we go into our friendships, and then people rely on us to be that kind of person in the friendship. When in fact, I really enjoy taking my therapist and coach hat off when I'm in friendship. I'm not here to counsel or coach my friends necessarily. Sometimes it's okay and appropriate, and a lot of times though, I need a space to be a human with all my flaws and my own insecurities, and not to be a professional. And I appreciate the friendships where I'm able to do that. And it feels we're on even ground, and there is a mutuality. They ask me about me, I ask them about them. We take up, maybe not in every conversation, 50-50 shared space, but overall, the relationship feels very mutual.
And because we're on a roll here, and that those friendships, like we almost need those friendships. I don't want to say more than other people, but we have a deep need to be seen and heard in a way that maybe other professionals don't. And because it's so hard for us to take off that hat, and it's so easy for people to look at us as the helper, it almost is like not getting what you need on this very core level when people don't see themselves as in a very important and valuable role as our friends.
Mhm. I find too, though, Sherry, even among the layman's crowd that maybe are not in the helping profession, that what you're calling out, the need to feel seen, is actually a need everybody has. I've talked to people in other professions, and when they don't have friends who validate their experience or their feelings, they often feel really lonely, even if they have the companionable friends that they do activities with. There's this sort of dearth of, I want to say, intimacy again, because there's not that sense of deep, deep feeling sharing that happens. I hear this more with men than women, that men have a harder time finding the friends that will provide that validation of feelings and experiences.
Or maybe we should loop Matthew into this discussion before we go off on a speeding train.
No, I love that you brought that up, and I appreciate it. I'm a weird guy, so I don't know that I'm indicative of everybody, but I think there are some similarities there, or at least some shared experiences there. And I do think that what I have found typically with men is that we tend to do together rather than be together, for the most part, painting with a very broad brushstroke here. The people that that are within my circles typically are ones that I do something with. I play games with them, or we do certain events together. Every once in a while, though, it does, somebody crosses that threshold where we can learn to be more responsive to emotions. I think it's a skill. And I guess maybe that's one of the things I want to bounce back, because I really caught the two of you as you were talking. Part of our challenges as healers, or part of our benefit as healers, is that we have these skills. We've been trained in these skills to reflect, to actively listen, to be present with our clients. Like that's all counseling, 501 classes.
Mhm.
And those are also qualities that make a great friend. But Sherry, going back to your question, is this personal or professional? So I might, as we land this here, kind of say, what can we impart to other people? How do we teach somebody to be a good friend? Teach them maybe some of these skills that are natural to us, but that we would also appreciate in them. What can you say about maybe active listening or empathy, those type of things?
Are you talking about if I were sitting with someone and helping them sort this out, or are you talking about how to help
Yeah.
my friends be better friends?
I'm kind of thinking one and the same. We have this platform to kind of talk to people, but I think sometimes we also need to empower somebody to show how they are present with our lives and teach them how to love us.
Well, when I've been really, really close to someone where I know that the relationship can withstand that sort of almost like power dynamic where I'm teaching someone how to do something for me because I need it, that can hurt a friendship, I think, because it may sound, even if it's unintentional, condescending, or could break the sense of friendship that's there if I'm calling out something they're not doing. But I have called out something that they're not doing when the relationship I knew was very strong. And what I got in return was excellent. When I said, I need us to talk more about us and our feelings. Like I want to know more about you and I want you to know more about me. And I'm not saying this because I want to break the friendship. I want to make it better. And that was received well when presented that way. And when I talk about, and I have been able to teach one or two friends about validation and how you do that. You don't one up me by saying, if I say, hey, I had this great trip to Thailand, and you said, well, that was nothing, I went to Nepal. I have been able to say, wait a second, that's it sounds like you're trying to relate, and I know the intention is good, and that is actually not how we validate each other. And I don't feel seen when you like one up me or change the subject. And I need you to listen. And I have. I mean, when the relationship is strong, I can say, hey, we moved on too fast. I'm not done processing the feelings. Could you pay attention a little bit more? And again, it's to deepen the friendship, not disrupt it. However, there have been other friendships where I did not feel that sense of safety within the container, and I didn't want or feel like it was my role to teach and change it, and I just wasn't that invested. So it really depended on like how invested am I in this friendship, and unfortunately, sometimes I don't let the friendship get any further because I don't feel like being the teacher, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't remember your original question. This question about safety. I think that is really hard to gauge and hard to define, but it's very personal and you know it when it's there. And so paying attention to what are those signs that this does feel safe to you, and then reacting to them. Brene Brown has a story about a jar. She tells this about her daughter. She taught this to her daughter. And it was that you have a jar. In each friendship, you have a jar. And whenever you do something that builds trust, it puts a marble in that jar. And if you break trust, it scoops them out. And that we can be as vulnerable with other people as there are marbles in that jar. And so that's always been something that I kind of am able to like pull back from those personal feelings and be able to say, all right, we don't have enough invested in this for us to have that kind of harder conversation. I think all of this, I think I keep asking clarifying questions because all of this gets really mucky for me. Like I'm a human being who comes with all kinds of personal sensitivities and vulnerabilities around this, around trusting other people and being able to share stuff about myself and trusting other people to be there for me. But when I have that therapist hat on, when I have that coach hat on, it's really easy for me to settle into this place where I can put those to the side. And so when I'm with someone and they start tweaking some of those like personal things, like I know that it's easy for me to fall back into that like professional, like I can help you. You don't have to know me in order for me to be of value to you. And so all of that stuff just gets all mucky in there. And when we're talking about like how to choose friends and how to help them be better friends or how to be better friends for them, it's so hard to tease these things apart.
Mm,
It's messy,
it
right?
is very
And that's,
messy.
we are all about the mess, right? And I think sometimes recognizing that these things are uncomfortable for us, and that we do have some of these vulnerabilities. And I appreciate you, Sherry, even reaching out, and even asking those clarifying questions. I think if we let ourselves be curious first, we can kind of start to see through this murk a little bit. I did want to throw real quick, if you're okay with it, Marlena, you said something that resonated with me as a neurodivergent, and this is a bad habit we have sometimes, and that's that telling the story. Um, Virtually everybody's different, but virtually a lot of people across the board will do this, where somebody tells the story and we will tell our own story as a neurodiverse person, and it's in our brains, it's not meant to one up. A lot of times it's meant to say, hey, I identify with you.
Mhm.
But it's definitely a skill. It's something we have to learn and be able to turn it back a little bit and to say, this is what I experienced when I was in Nepal. Is this the way you felt when
Mhm.
you were in New Zealand, or
Mhm.
where like, so I think those require what Sherry's talking about, that vulnerability of saying, I appreciate your story, but you kind of overstepped me a little bit here,
Mhm.
so
Couples do this all the time where they'll be like, here is my day, here is my day, and they won't ask anything about it. So one of the things that I teach couples to do is just to ask curious questions. And I use the rule of three. That's my go-to with most people. Like, ask three questions that show that you were getting what they said and were interested, and bring out something more than what they just told you.
mm,
So
I love it.
Well, I love that, Sherry. Like, I love that. And to remind yourself to be responsive to the person's story, like reminding yourself, like, I'm not yet the spotlight of this conversation. Can I keep the focus on the other person long enough so that they feel heard, even if that feels like a little forced? It can be very helpful to deepening a friendship, is to allow the person space to have their full space. I have also noticed, though, with highly sensitive people, myself included, that sometimes I'm too giving of the space and not enough receiving. And so I have taken it upon myself to actually say what I need before I start something. So I'm not led having unmet or unsaid expectations, and then I'm disappointed and angry and resentful because you didn't listen to me. I'll say, hey, I really need to talk about this thing. You got 20 minutes? Like, this is important to me and I need to talk. Can you listen? And with good friends, they'll tell me, I have time tomorrow, or we can talk today, or this weekend's good for me. And I allow them the space to say when they're available to hear my little spiel. Um, so that's been a helpful tactic for me, to not overrun my friends with emotional dumping, as we talked about. I put them on alert. I need to emotionally dump. When are you free?
Mm,
yeah,
no, that's
good.
great, and that prepares them. It lets them say, hey, I need to be here for that. And I think recognition of that. Do they have the space to do that? Do we have the room in our bucket to have somebody dump?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can totally be there for that if we're expecting it. So
Yeah, and likewise, when you
yeah.
have a similar story to share, like you were talking about earlier, Matthew, like
Mm,
when you want to say, like, my Nepal experience is much like your Thailand experience. Sometimes I'll say, hey, I don't mean to change the subject, but do you mind if I share something, my own experience that might relate to this? And I'll like
mm,
lead with that, so it doesn't feel like I'm abruptly hijacking the conversation.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I was just going to add to that kind of preface. Like, very often with couples, I'll teach them to say that I need to vent, or I'm looking for support, or I need help solving this at the beginning, because then
Mm-hmm.
that cues their partner to know what kind of a conversation this is.
Absolutely.
I,
Absolutely.
I use the three L's a lot. Do you need me to listen? Do you need me to help you look for a solution, or do you need me to leave you alone? And
Mm.
a lot of times just being able to be responsive to somebody.
Mhm.
And again, when you're dealing with neurodivergent people with friends, a lot of times we do need that alone space. We need a quiet time. We need a time to decompress. We might not be able to talk about something in that particular space because our spoons are gone at that time.
Mhm.
But Marlene, to your point, I think the more we telegraph what's going on and can be vulnerable with our people, if we have the marbles in the jar, right? Then we can kind
Exactly.
of, you know, this it's messy, but it's going to continue to build as we go along.
Mhm. And I guess with that, Matthew, to that point, I expect some transparency and honesty in my friendships, so that I know where I stand, and I can't feel close to people if they don't share what's going on with them. That's part of the joy of the friendship for me, is getting to know your inner world as well as you get to know mine. It's
Yeah.
very satisfying for me emotionally to have that interaction. And I used to have a mentor used to say, you need six. Like, there should be like no more probably than six people in the inner circle. Who are those people? And those people may alternate in and out, but I feel like for many years I've been able to have more or less six people confidants that I can lean on, and I know they're going to be there, maybe not right away, but they're not going to judge me for whatever's going on. And I just have that, they're the squishy place that I can land in. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So we've had some really good talks about things that make for good friendships. Again, not clear cut, but messy, right? What the vulnerability, time spent. Do we make time for that other person? Do we telegraph what our needs? Are we able to put those kind of things aside? And I think at some point, whether it's a single with a friend or whether we're dealing with a couples where they have been, I mean, truly the more intensive friendships, at some point we have a challenge of where things aren't working out. So we talked a little bit about addressing hurt in there, but what do we do when a friendship isn't working? How do we know it's not working, and what do we do about it?
I just want to give some voice to the fact that losing a good friend, whether it's by your choice or their choice or circumstance, can feel as heartbreaking as breaking up with someone. And a lot of times we have friends that we're even closer with than our spouse, which is a whole different topic, but we do.
Mhm.
And so that can really just be very, very difficult to adjust to and make sense of.
Thank you for bringing that up. As a single person who's been single most of her life, I have relied on friends to be my stand-in partners, family, confidants. They have been like family to me, my friendships, and they have mattered tremendously. So when friendships fade or what have you, of course, it's very hurtful. It's like losing a family member sometimes. And but I know friendships don't work for me when I think of that little toxic acronym. I don't know if you all have heard it. It stands for, it's FOG: fear, obligation, and guilt. Relationships that are characterized by fear, obligation, and guilt tend to be toxic. And I know how, if a friendship needs some distance or space, when I'm beginning to feel that way, when our interactions are happening, or I feel really drained after the interaction or negative. So, and that's a pattern, right? When it's a pattern, I've had friendships in the past where over and over and over again, I felt really drained. And I could tell like my energy was zapped and I wasn't looking forward to the next hangout. And then I had to determine, like, okay, what's going on here? What am I getting out of this? How am I maybe participating in this dynamic? Because I always want to take responsibility for my part. Like, how am I contributing to these feelings? And maybe I need to set some boundaries, because I really can't ask anyone else to do it for me. And then again, determining, do I do the slow fade away? Do I have a conversation because I'm invested? Different friendships take different tactics.
All right, so I have to grab my notepad because I want to write down all of the things that you just said, because there was so much wisdom in that.
That's the highlight reel right there. We're gonna grab that one.
Yeah. Yeah. It shows up in personal relationships too, right? Fog, fear, obligation, and guilt, or with family members, like not just friendships. And sometimes you can work your way around and out of that. And sometimes boundaries are what's needed.
Yeah. I guess I want to bring up ghosting. I mean, that's such a big part of our culture at this point that there are friendships where you can feel like you're invested in it, but then the other person just disappears. And that is another heartbreak moment.
Mhm. Absolutely. Our attachment styles, I think, show up too in friendships like that. We can feel anxious or avoidant or what have you. I've had friends that were for a season, and not a lifetime, even if I had wanted that to be, some, that saying, people are in our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Uh, the lifetime friends are obvious matter the most to me, and I have kept them for many, 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 many years. And but some friends come in and out of my life, and they were just there for that particular era, and they served a purpose, and I thank them for it. But kind of the Marie Kondo thing, thank you, and it's okay to release.
Mm.
you know
Yeah, absolutely. And there's still, going back to Sherry's point, and I love that you pointed it out, we still have a grief. We still have this loss over the friendship, but being able to say thank you, for, especially if they're the reason of the reason of the season, you
Mhm.
know, um, those relationships are there for that period of time, and we can show gratitude, but also show that release. And what I heard, the fear, obligation, guilt, so we're not stuck in that.
Mhm.
So maybe what I caught in that, Marlena, was that when we start having resistance of friendships, when we start struggling with something, maybe kind of being tuned into our own emotional state. Why are we feeling this way? And
Mhm.
taking some time with that can be super beneficial.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm pretty diplomatic when it comes to this sort of thing. I will always err on the side of extreme politeness. And I feel that, again, some friendships can withstand some engagement and conflict, and that can make the friendship stronger. Must admit that often I have let friendships fade of their own because both parties stopped being invested, just sort of like a relationship. And in some cases, that felt really appropriate, and perhaps in some, I needed to say something.
mhm,
I feel like we're talking around the idea that um, friendships require time, and they
Hmm.
either take the time invested with the person, but they also take the time of reflecting on that relationship and realizing where that stands and how much that relationship can withstand and how much we value that, and therefore how much are we willing to invest in it.
mhm.
Hmm.
I just think that we're
Agreed.
in such a busy world that I think people need to like slow down and actually think about this if that's important to them.
Absolutely, Sherry, because I mean, it's all comes down to awareness of your own feelings and your needs and what's important, and making time for that which you deem important. Sometimes we feel that something is important, but our time demonstrates something entirely different. And
Yeah.
so reorganizing our priorities is so important with friendships as well, because friendships fill in so many other gaps. I love friendship so much. I mean, friendship has been such a stalwart in my like growth and development and well-being. Like, because partners have come and gone in my life, and sometimes even family members, but friendships have really withstood a lot of my life. And I'm so grateful to the deep friendships in my life. Even the passing ones, they were so needed when they came in. I feel like we should be having, like, I don't know if there's an International Friends Day, but we don't celebrate the anniversaries of our friendships. But for me, they've been almost, if not more important than a lot of relationships.
Yeah. So being able to have those connections, to be mindful, to give them time and space, and I think, what we say, just be active about it, be intentional about it, so that we know what's there. So
Mhm.
I have the SpongeBob thing in my head. F is for friends, and it's just like, it's gonna be a terrible theme song for this episode. So we got to find a better one. But
Well,
so
and I think friendships also require a lot of forgiveness, to Sherry's point. Like, if we haven't been investing in friendships that are important to us and a priority, but we've let them slide to the wayside. I had a friend recently contact me and said, "I've been a terrible friend. I'm so sorry. I have been struggling with severe burnout." Didn't know. That would
mm,
explain the absence of messages and calls and responses. And so when I learned that, I'm like, well, of course, like, I'm not going to be mad at you because you're burning out. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
yeah,
Let's have a conversation about your burnout if you're when you're not feeling so energetically wiped. But yeah. And again, it all
or
comes down for me to communication. Go ahead.
Yeah, or here's a podcast episode that you can listen to about burnout. It's
I
from
got something for you.
just shameless self-promotion in the middle of this. But no, but you're absolutely right. Being able to see all of that. So,
Mhm.
well, we have burnout as a past episode. We also had vulnerability as a past episode. And so maybe leaning into that here a little bit as we close up today. For you both, what has been a pivotal point of friendship for you personally, either in terms of being a friend or having a friend? Because I think you have these great gems of wisdom, and I imagine they probably come typically from somewhere, and a lot of times it comes from hitting that wall, but also maybe a good thing. So maybe personally, what's been a good friend, or where have you been a good friend?
Something that came to mind when we were brainstorming before this episode, Matthew, is when I had a friend. I've had actually a few people in my life go through surgeries that needed care, like get fed, help getting to the bathroom, things like that. And I have been I think I was a very good friend. I actually took time off to help friends like get through their surgeries, spend the night at their house, prepare a meal, do that sort of acts of service, but also feeling it made me feel great to be of help. I enjoyed, I wasn't so burned out or tapped out. The relationship was important to me. I wanted to help, and it really got us closer. That's a very vulnerable moment for them. I'm so glad they asked me for the help, and I'm glad I was able to give it joyfully.
I want to emphasize how important it is that if you only have 30 seconds and you think of your friend, that you would take the time to send them a text and say, "How are you doing?" Or "I was thinking of you." I think a lot of times we think that's not enough, but those little touch points matter so much in getting you through those longer spans when you can't spend time together. And in this day and age, you can find a GIF or a GIF, however people say that. You can find a meme to send. You might come across something that you find funny or touching that you think your friend would find meaningful, and just to take that second and send that, and that makes such a difference for the person on the other side.
Mm.
Absolutely. It's great. Yes. And in this day and era of digital technology, it's so great to have that quick way to connect. But I think we can overlook it a lot of times too. I don't need to go to Hallmark, buy a card, send it, stamp it. Like I can literally just send a goofy emoji, GIF, whatever. It's funny because we're in the middle of talking about this. My phone popped up. My wife gave me a random text message or a random one of these, like perfect timing. So yeah, you two are talking. The thing that really came to mind with me, it was living vicariously. My son had, I think it was 32,000 friends over. It might have just been 5. I don't know. The volume level was tremendous this weekend. And all the boys sat down there. They played Dungeons and Dragons together. And I just sat and I observed them. They were all different. All different personalities. There's the really quiet, gentle giant guy, and then there's the one who doesn't need a speakerphone and can call his parents from our living room, actually without the phone in general. So and so all these boys are different, but they all jive together, and they found something that connected them. They had fun, and I think I'm looking at 12 and 13-year-olds. It's like, man, I need this in my life too. Whether it's we play together, have fun together, and just make those meaningful connections. So to that end, obviously thank both of you for this shared experience we have doing the podcast and the practices together as well. So as we wrap up, any take homes that you want to make sure? I think both of you did a great job kind of summing it up, but anything else do we need to add here at the end?
Take care of yourself, have good boundaries, know what you need, look for and resonate with the people who that makes sense to them, that's easy for them to give. I guess even in thinking about how we came together, look for the people who need the same thing that you do and therefore are willing to give it freely.
Great advice.
I would also say, given the rise of the pandemic and our separation geographically and isolation in all other ways, that people are really desperate for friendship. And I think when we get lonely, we actually have a negativity bias. We tend to think that people don't want to hang out with us. The more isolated we become, the more negative projecting we also become. We become more mistrusting the more isolated and lonely we get ourselves, which is a negative feedback cycle. And so people are less likely to reach out. And so I would encourage our listeners to become aware of the fact that if you're feeling lonely and isolated, chances are other people are feeling the same way, and to not be afraid to put yourself out there. Other people need friendship, especially men need friendship just as much as you do. And so
Especially women.
don't assume that your friendship attempts are going to be rejected. That it's worth it to try and make friends wherever you find them, whether it's the shared activity on the tennis court or at an 12-step meeting or wherever, because people are lonely. We all need friends, and some people don't have nearly enough.
Absolutely. Great advice. And I appreciate both of you on that. I would maybe just add for the misfits is find your tribe, find your people. There are, I don't know what the count is, how many billions of people on this planet. With digital technology being what it is, we can find our tribe if we're being ourselves authentically. Let that shine, find the people who vibe with you, and keep a hold of those close. So, well, thank you both as always. Sherry, you are one more time at your website is
SherryTimko.com. My Facebook group is Date Night Community, and it's for couples. So that's also a good place if you want to interact with me.
Yep, absolutely. Marlena?
Find me at coachmarlena.com. I also have a Facebook group. It's called Love and Life Support for Spiritual Singles. You can join that and hopefully meet some like minds in there.
Awesome. Sounds great. And I'm at MatthewEMorgan.com or Misfit Refuge. And we look forward to seeing you on the socials. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and just tune in week after week as we just continue dropping these little bits of knowledge and experience that we can. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.